Today, we're talking about a seductive idea that has captured the imagination of innovators and reformers alike: the promise of a digital fix for democracy. We live in an age of democratic strain, marked by challenges like voter apathy and a sense that our systems are failing to capture the true will of the people. Into this void comes the siren song of advanced digital governance, systems that promise a more fluid, responsive, and convenient form of politics. But it's our strategic imperative to look beyond the slick user interface. Beneath the surface of this convenience lies a dangerous convergence of systemic risk, geopolitical tension, and a fundamental threat to the integrity of our political systems. So, the question we must ask is this: in our relentless pursuit of a technological solution, are we inadvertently building a digital Trojan horse that threatens to undermine our security, our sovereignty, and the very foundations of democratic rule? Let's begin with one of the most intellectually appealing of these new models: liquid democracy. It's presented as an elegant hybrid, blending the best of direct and representative democracy. The idea is a form of transitive proxy voting. You can either vote on an issue yourself or delegate your vote to an expert you trust. If that expert, in turn, delegates to another, your vote travels with theirs. This model is strategically important because it promises to leverage specialized knowledge and enforce a kind of dynamic accountability. If you disagree with your delegate's decision, you can retract your proxy instantly. But as we dissect its mechanics, a primary structural weakness emerges, an almost gravitational pull toward the concentration of power. Because delegations are transitive, a small handful of highly visible agents inevitably accumulates an immense number of votes. This creates an expertise paradox, where the system designed to leverage broad expertise ends up centralizing influence, making it potentially even less likely to identify a ground truth than simple direct voting. This centralization opens new vectors for manipulation and bribery, transforming political conflict into a purely computational arms race, where success depends on defending against combinatorial attacks on the delegation graph. The system, rather than fostering a vibrant democracy, is efficiently transformed into an oligarchy. While liquid democracy's design fails by concentrating who has power, other models introduce an even more corrosive flaw by directly linking power to how much one can pay. This brings us to quadratic voting, a mechanism designed to solve the classic problem of the tyranny of the majority, where a passionate minority can be consistently overruled by a tepid majority. Its strategic appeal lies in allowing voters to express the intensity of their preferences. The mechanics are clever. Each voter gets a budget of credits and can buy votes, but the cost increases quadratically. One vote might cost 1 credit, but a second vote on the same issue costs 4, and a third costs 9. This design encourages you to spread your influence, but here we find its most profound flaw. It explicitly monetizes political influence. It risks transforming pre-existing wealth inequality directly into political inequality, fundamentally challenging the democratic principle of one person, one vote. In fact, if voter preferences are polarized by wealth, simple majority rule may be ethically superior. Beyond this, the system is critically vulnerable to Sybil attacks, where a malicious actor bypasses the quadratic cost by creating multiple fake identities. The only defense is a robust proof of personhood mechanism, creating a deep paradox. For a decentralized system like quadratic voting to be secure, it must often rely on a centralized authority, like the state, to verify identity, forcing it to depend on the very power structures it aims to circumvent. These theoretical flaws are not just abstract concerns. They manifest with destructive consequences when implemented in the real world. This is where we must examine the proving ground of decentralized autonomous organizations, or DAOs, and the infrastructure being built by key developers like Protocol Labs. Protocol Labs has an ambitious vision to upgrade governance systems and secure digital human rights using foundational technologies like the interplanetary file system and Filecoin. Yet, when we look at the DAOs built on these principles, we see a story of systemic failure. In practice, DAOs are plagued by extreme voter apathy, causing decision-making power to fall into the hands of a few large token holders, or whales. This token-based governance doesn't resemble civic participation. It mirrors corporate shareholding, where capital equals control, a dynamic that creates significant regulatory risk by jeopardizing the classification of DAO tokens as non-securities. Furthermore, when DAOs use delegation, they replicate and amplify the failures of liquid democracy. Power concentrates in the hands of a few highly visible, often pseudonymous delegates, and empirical data reveals a critical problem of misaligned delegation, where delegates' actions frequently do not match the expressed interests of the token holders they represent. The core failure is this: the economic mechanisms of these systems inherently undermine their philosophical goals, defaulting not to equitable governance, but to financial oligarchy. This forces our focus away from the internal flaws of the software and toward the physical and political world upon which all this technology depends. It's a critical link, and one that is too often overlooked. These digital systems do not exist in a vacuum. They run on physical hardware and cloud services that have a national origin and are subject to the influence of nation-states. There is no better illustration of this risk than the case of CloudMinds, a Chinese firm specializing in advanced technologies like cloud robotics, a centralized cloud brain, and deep learning laboratories. After enjoying initial Western funding and academic partnerships, the company was placed on the U.S. government's entity list, designated as a threat for its role in supporting China's military modernization. This case is a prototypical example of dual-use technology transfer, where commercial AI infrastructure is co-opted for state intelligence and military objectives. This dynamic creates what strategists term the geopoliticalization of AI infrastructure, a critical contamination vector that runs through our global tech supply chains. The implication is stark. Even a perfect governance algorithm would be worthless if its physical foundation is compromised. The security guarantees of decentralized software can be rendered meaningless if the underlying hardware is controlled by a state actor, compromising national security by proxy. This compounding of risks, flawed mechanisms, failed implementations, and compromised infrastructure must now be brought to bear on the most sacred of all democratic functions, the public election. This leads us to directly challenge a popular and dangerous myth, the idea that blockchain technology can secure public elections. The strategic conversation here must be grounded in the non-negotiable requirements for any electoral system. It must be verifiable, auditable, and resilient. Purely digital voting fails this test. Mobile voting pilot programs, like the Votes app, were subjected to independent analysis by MIT researchers, who found the app riddled with vulnerabilities that could allow an attacker to alter votes and compromise voter privacy. This underscores a point of universal consensus among election security experts. The only way to ensure resilience is with a voter-verified paper record. Without a physical voter-verified paper ballot, a meaningful post-election audit is impossible, leaving digital systems vulnerable to manipulation that could be completely undetectable. This is compounded by the fact that many vendors use proprietary, closed-source code, which has historically been used to hide severe security flaws, directly contradicting the transparency that public trust demands. But even if we could secure the voting machines themselves, an even more insidious threat bypasses the hardware entirely, targeting the mind of the voter, a threat supercharged by artificial intelligence. Here we must identify artificial intelligence as a powerful and emergent threat multiplier against democratic integrity. Its strategic significance is not just as a tool for hacking systems, but as a weapon for manipulating the electorate. AI now plays a dual role in this new governance landscape. On offense, malicious actors use AI to generate deep fakes and spread hyper-realistic disinformation designed to mislead voters about a candidate's record or even administrative details like when and where to vote. We have already seen this in practice, with AI-generated robocalls that mimicked a political figure to urge voters to stay home from a primary election, a direct attempt at disenfranchisement. On defense, the irony is that the very systems we've discussed, like quadratic voting and DAOs, require their own sophisticated AI for proof of personhood to defend against bots and Sybil attacks. What this creates is a co-evolutionary conflict, a high-stakes computational arms race between malicious AI used for manipulation and defensive AI used for system security. This escalating arms race between offensive and defensive AI brings all our previously discussed risks, from flawed code to compromised hardware, to a final critical point. Ultimately, we are facing a perfect storm of vulnerabilities. We have governance mechanisms like liquid democracy and quadratic voting that are structurally prone to collapse into oligarchy and plutocracy. We have the geopolitical weaponization of the underlying hardware and cloud infrastructure, where commercial technology is co-opted by state actors. We have the proven insecurity of purely digital voting systems that lack the physical audit trails necessary for trust. And finally, we are witnessing an escalating arms race of AI-driven disinformation aimed at the heart of our electoral process. The conclusion, therefore, must be a call for profound caution. Our public discourse and policy decisions must prioritize verifiable integrity, security, and proven democratic principles over the high-risk allure of technological convenience. Given these interlocking failures, the recommendations that emerge are not preferences. They are baseline security requirements, mandating voter-verified paper records, regulating delegation in digital systems, and enhancing export controls on dual-use technology should not be seen as barriers to innovation. They are the essential guardrails we must build to preserve democracy in the 21st century.